As you can imagine, my family has a lot of very heartwarming stories. I mean, really, truly touching stuff. And one of them actually relates to Donald's accepting the $400 million gift in the form of a luxury 747 from the royal family of Qatar. As we should all know by now, it is an extremely dangerous thing to put in a position of power anybody who only cares about money, and Donald literally cares about nothing else. To be fair, though, he comes by this honestly, because for my grandfather, who was a sociopath, money was the only currency, which is to say that for him and for almost everybody else in my family, money was not only more important than everything else. Frivolous things like, I don't know, love, kindness, affection, it stood in for all of those things. It essentially replaced them. So, as a Trump, you could actually gauge your worth, literal and figurative, by how much material wealth you had compared to everybody else. And you could also gauge your worth by what you were given by my grandfather, or not, as the case may be. My grandmother was not immune to this prevailing attitude. A few years after my dad died in 1981, she and I became very close. And now, it wasn't easy, it took a lot of work, but at one point, she and I actually spent a lot of time together. I called her every day, and depending on where I was living at the time, whether I was in the city or out on Long Island, I visited her at her house or took her out to lunch at least once a week and sometimes more. During one of these visits, we were hanging out in the kitchen, and we were talking about the fact that my apartment on the Upper West Side had been burgled. I was a graduate student at Columbia at the time, and in addition to my stereo and all of my CDs and stuff, my electric typewriter, yes, this was a very, very, very long time ago, had also been stolen. I mentioned to her that I really needed a new typewriter because I was working on my dissertation, and she offered to write me a check. I said no, I'd figured it out. And then, for the first and only time in my life, Gam, as I called her, gave me some advice. She said very seriously, Mary, never reject a gift of money. As you can imagine, that changed my life tremendously. So that philosophy, if that's what you want to call it, was drilled into Donald forever. And I saw what happened when a gift of money was rejected, because this is exactly what happened to my mother. For reasons I don't understand, after my parents got divorced, my mother was required to show up to all of the Trump family holidays. So my parents split up when I was 2.5. They got divorced when I was 5. And yet, she was at Thanksgiving and Christmas every year, even when my dad wasn't. She went to Mother's Day. She went to my grandfather's birthday. And, any other holidays that required her presence, or any other celebrations, weddings, for example. Now, it didn't help, of course, that nobody in my dad's family liked my mother very much, and they didn't treat her particularly well. But again, even though my dad was mostly never there, I have very few recollections of his being at family holidays. She was, I use the word required, and I mean, it's not like I had a contractual agreement, but I think they wanted her there to kind of keep up appearances because, that was a time when the mother was considered the more important parent. The mother should be with the children on the holidays. I guess what never occurred to anybody is that, we could have had our own holidays, but we absolutely had to be at my grandparents' house for both Thanksgiving and Christmas. And it was a little weird because all of my aunts and uncles were married or had their own families, and yet they didn't spend Christmas with their in-laws ever. It was always at the Trumps. So I think my mother felt an obligation. She felt like she should be with her children, and I can understand why she would want to be, but it wasn't fun for anybody, and it didn't really do anybody any good. So this continued long after my dad died, when I was 16. she was still going to Trump family holidays when I was in my until I was in my early 20s. And then, for reasons I honestly still don't understand, Donald was still married to Ivana at the time. My Uncle Rob was married to his first wife, Blaine. Blaine and Ivana went to my grandmother before Thanksgiving one year, and she said, "We don't want Linda," it's my mother, "we don't want Linda at holidays anymore. You know, she's difficult, she's too depressing," whatever it was. And they never made an effort with her, ever. They always made her feel like an outsider. And by the way, my mother had been part of the family since 1960 or 62, since 1962. So she had predated all of them. And yet, Donald's wife and Robert's wife didn't want Linda to be invited to holidays anymore. And by this time, again, it had been almost 30 years of this. So you can imagine, my mother took it very badly. And she didn't go to Thanksgiving. But my brother and I still did. We were still required to go. And then we showed up at Christmas. Now I know, in retrospect, that makes me feel terrible. But, you know, there was no questioning things in this family, ever. And when we showed up to Thanksgiving, the same thing happened that happened every year. Everybody in the family was given a gift check from my grandfather and my grandmother. And these were not inconsiderable sums of money. Basically, you are allowed to gift somebody a certain amount of money so that that gift is not taxed. And this is what really rich people do to make their estates smaller, so when they die, there's less money to tax. So everybody got 2 checks every Christmas, and I considered it hazard pay. So even though my mother wasn't there that year, she too got the checks. And then you know what happened? She rejected the gift of money. And as I said, these were not inconsiderable sums. Would have been helpful. I think if she had accepted it, she probably would have continued to get those checks every year, even though she was not going to holidays anymore. And I think she was taking a stand. I think she was making a stand on principle that if they are going to reject me like this, then I am accepting nothing from them. It was self-defeating, even if you can understand the impulse behind it. But she broke that rule. She rejected the gift of money, and she never got another thing from them again. So, can we blame Donald for accepting gifts of value, even if they're actually bribes? Yeah, we can. So my advice to you is that, let's teach our children better values. I would never tell my kid that the greatest lesson in life is to learn never to reject a gift of money. I think we can do better. And you know what else? I think we should demand that our leaders, whether they want to or not, must reject gifts of money. Because otherwise, it's becoming increasingly clear all of them and all of America is just for sale to the highest bidder. Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating, because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.